Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. Okay, here goes nothing. I've been living a lie online for almost a decade, and it's time the truth came out. This isn't just about some harmless photoshopping or a slightly inflated dating profile. This is about creating an entirely fake persona and stringing someone along for years, someone who deserves so much better than what I gave them. It all started when I was 16. I was awkward, insecure, and painfully shy. High school was a social minefield I navigated with as much grace as a newborn giraffe. I was overweight, plagued with acne, and convinced that no one would ever be interested in me romantically. So, I retreated into the internet. It was a place where I could be whoever I wanted to be, without the judgment and insecurities that plagued my real life. I stumbled upon a photo of this girl online, a model from some obscure European website. She was stunning, long, flowing blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, and a smile that could melt glaciers. On a whim, I created a fake profile using her pictures. I called myself Sarah, and I meticulously crafted a backstory. A small-town girl with big dreams, an aspiring artist with a love for indie music and old movies. The details were generic enough to be believable, but specific enough to create a sense of personality. I started joining online forums and chat rooms, connecting with people who shared my interests. And then I met him. His name was Mark. He was funny, intelligent, and incredibly kind. We bonded over our shared love of books, our cynical views on pop culture, and our mutual disdain for small talk. He lived in a different state, which, at the time, felt like a safety net. I could pretend to be someone else without the fear of bumping into him at the local grocery store. Our conversations started as casual exchanges, but quickly evolved into something deeper. We talked every day, sharing our hopes, our fears, and our dreams for the future. I crafted elaborate stories about my life as Sarah, drawing inspiration from movies, books, and my own imagination. I became a master of deception, weaving a web of lies so intricate that even I sometimes struggle to keep track of them. As the months turned into years, my feelings for Mark grew stronger. I knew it was wrong, that I was living a fantasy built on a foundation of lies, but I couldn't bring myself to end it. He was the only person who had ever truly seen me, or at least, the person I pretended to be. He loved Sarah, and I desperately craved that love. I told myself that one day, I would come clean, that I would reveal the truth, and hope that he could forgive me. But the longer I waited, the harder it became. The fear of losing him outweighed the guilt, and I continued to perpetuate the lie. We made plans to meet in person, promises we both knew I could never keep. I always had an excuse, a family emergency, a last-minute trip, a sudden illness. Mark was incredibly understanding, always offering his support and assuring me that we would meet eventually. His unwavering patience only made my guilt worse. As I got older, the fantasy started to feel more and more suffocating. I watched my real life pass me by while I lived vicariously through this fake online persona. I graduated high school, went to college, and started a career, all while maintaining the elaborate fiction of Sarah. I met people in real life, formed friendships, even went on a few dates, but I always held back, knowing that I couldn't fully commit to anyone as long as I was living this double life. The lie had become a prison, trapping me in a cycle of deception and regret. About 3 years ago, Mark started talking about marriage. He said he couldn't imagine spending his life with anyone else, that Sarah was his soulmate. My heart sank. I knew I couldn't let him propose, couldn't let him build a future based on a lie. I considered ghosting him, simply disappearing from his life without explanation. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. He deserved more than that. So, I did the only thing I could think of. I confessed. I wrote him a long, rambling email, pouring out my heart and revealing the truth about my identity. I told him about the fake profile, the stolen pictures, the years of deception. I explained my insecurities, my fears, and my desperate need for connection. I braced myself for his anger, his disappointment, his rejection. And then I waited. Days turned into weeks, and I heard nothing. I checked my email obsessively, hoping for some sign of forgiveness, some indication that he hadn't completely written me off. But there was only silence. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I received a response. It was short and to the point. He said he was hurt, betrayed, and confused. He needed time to process everything, and he didn't know if he could ever forgive me. I understood. I knew I had broken his trust, and that it would take time, if ever, to rebuild it. We started talking again, tentatively at first, then with increasing frequency. He asked me a lot of questions, trying to understand my motivations and the reasons behind my deception. I answered as honestly as I could, laying bare my vulnerabilities and owning up to my mistakes. He was surprisingly understanding, even compassionate. He said he still cared about me, but that he needed to meet me in person, to see if the person behind the fake profile was someone he could actually love. That was 2 years ago. We've been talking online ever since. I've sent him recent pictures of myself, and we video chatted a few times. He knows what I really look like, what my real name is, what my actual life is like. He says he's still attracted to me, that he still sees the qualities he fell in love with in the real me. We're planning to meet in person next month. I'm terrified. I'm afraid that the connection we built online won't translate into real life, that he'll be disappointed when he finally sees me face to face. I'm afraid that I'll never be able to fully make up for the damage I've caused, that the shadow of my deception will always linger between us. But I also know that I owe it to him to try. He deserves the truth. He deserves a real relationship, and he deserves to know if there's a future for us beyond the screen. So, I'm taking a leap of faith. I'm putting myself out there, vulnerable and exposed, hoping that he can see past my mistakes and see the person I am today. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if we'll end up together, or if this is just a temporary reprieve from the consequences of my actions. But I do know that I'm finally being honest, and that's a start. I had to be honest with everyone in Mark. This is my confession. This is my truth. What I'm about to say isn't easy. It's not a story I tell at parties, or even to my closest friends. It's a knot in my stomach, a weight on my chest, a secret I've carried for far too long. It's about love, or at least what I thought was love, and the elaborate, heartbreaking deception that unfolded online. It started, as so many of these stories do, with a simple friend request. I was fresh out of a messy breakup, vulnerable, and scrolling endlessly through social media when a profile caught my eye. Ava Thompson, the name read, accompanied by a photo of a striking woman with long, dark hair, piercing blue eyes, and a smile that seemed to radiate warmth. Her profile was filled with pictures of her traveling, hiking, and volunteering at animal shelters. She seemed adventurous, compassionate, and effortlessly cool. Everything I wasn't, or at least didn't feel like at the time. I hesitated for a moment before clicking accept. Within minutes, I had a message from her. Hey, thanks for accepting my request. You seem like you have a great energy. How are you? Her messages were always thoughtful and engaging, never generic or superficial. We talked about everything, our hopes, our fears, our dreams. She was a writer, working on a novel, and I was captivated by her intelligence and her passion. We spent hours messaging each other every day, and soon, those messages turned into late-night video calls. Seeing her face, hearing her voice, felt like a dream come true. She was even more beautiful in motion, her eyes sparkling with intelligence and humor. We fell hard and fast. We made plans for the future, talked about traveling together, and even discussed the possibility of moving in together someday. I was completely smitten. There was just one problem. Ava couldn't meet in person. She was living in another state, caring for her ailing grandmother. It was a difficult situation, she explained, and she couldn't leave her grandmother alone for more than a few hours at a time. I understood, or at least, I told myself I did. I was so caught up in the fantasy of our relationship that I ignored the red flags waving in front of my face. I reasoned that her grandmother's health was the priority, and that we would meet as soon as things improved. Months turned into a year, and still, no meeting. Every time I brought it up, Ava would become evasive, offering excuses and apologies. Her grandmother's health was always fluctuating, she said. It was a constant roller coaster, and she couldn't predict when things would get better. I started to get suspicious, but I pushed those doubts aside. I didn't want to believe that the woman I loved, the woman I had poured my heart and soul into, was lying to me. Then, one day, I received a message from an unknown number. "You need to know the truth about Ava Thompson." It read. My heart sank. I clicked on the profile attached to the number and was met with a photo of the same woman I had fallen in love with, but the name was different. Sarah Miller. I scrolled through the profile, my hands shaking. It was filled with pictures of her in different outfits, different hairstyles, but it was undeniably the same person. The bio read, aspiring actress, currently working as a barista, dreams of making it big in Hollywood. I was devastated, betrayed, confused. I confronted Ava with the information, sending her the link to Sarah Miller's profile. She didn't respond at first. Hours went by, and I sat there, numb, staring at my phone, waiting for an explanation. Finally, a message came through. "Okay, you got me," she wrote. "It's true. I'm not Ava." My world crumbled around me. I demanded to know why she had lied, why she had created this elaborate facade. Her explanation was a tangled mess of insecurities, loneliness, and a desperate desire for connection. She was insecure about her looks, she said, and afraid that no one would love her for who she really was. She had seen my profile and was drawn to my vulnerability. She created the Ava Thompson persona as a way to connect with me without revealing her true self. "I know it was wrong," she wrote. "I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted to be loved." Her words offered little comfort. I was furious, heartbroken, and confused. How could someone pretend to be someone else for so long? How could someone string me along, knowing that the entire relationship was built on a lie? I spent the next few days in a daze, replaying every conversation, every video call, every shared moment in my head. I tried to make sense of it all, to understand how I could have been so blind. I decided to confront her in person. I tracked down Sarah Miller's address through some online sleuthing and booked a flight to Los Angeles. I needed to see her face to face, to hear her explanation in person. When I arrived at her apartment, she was surprised to see me. She looked different than the pictures, less polished, more ordinary. Her eyes, though still blue, didn't hold the same spark as Ava's. We sat down in her small, cluttered living room, and she repeated her apologies. She told me about her struggles with self-esteem, her longing for a life that seemed out of reach. She said she had fallen in love with me too, that our connection was real, even if the foundation was built on a lie. I didn't know what to believe. Part of me wanted to forgive her, to believe that our connection was genuine. But another part of me was consumed by anger and resentment. How could I trust someone who had deceived me so completely? In the end, I walked away. I told her that I couldn't forgive her, that I needed to move on. I left Los Angeles with a broken heart and a shattered sense of trust. It took me a long time to heal from the experience. I struggled with feelings of shame and embarrassment, wondering how I could have been so gullible. I avoided online dating for years, afraid of being catfished again. But eventually, I realized that I couldn't let one bad experience ruin my chances of finding love. I started dating again, cautiously, and eventually met someone who was honest, genuine, and kind. We've been together for 5 years now, and I couldn't be happier. But even now, years later, the memory of Ava Thompson, or rather, Sarah Miller, lingers in the back of my mind. It's a reminder of the dangers of online deception and the importance of trusting your instincts. What I'm about to say isn't easy, because living with it hasn't been either. It's a confession about vulnerability, manipulation, and the blurred lines of identity in the digital age. It's a story that taught me a painful but valuable lesson about the importance of authenticity, both online and in real life. It's a story I needed to tell, to finally release the weight of that secret and move forward with a clearer, more honest heart. This is probably the hardest thing I've ever had to admit, even to myself. I haven't told anyone, not my family, not my closest friends. The shame is just too overwhelming. It's about a catfish love story, but not the kind you see on MTV. This is way messier, way more twisted, and it involves me being the catfish. It started a few years ago. I was in a really lonely place, fresh out of a bad breakup, feeling insecure about my looks, my career, everything. I spent way too much time scrolling through social media, comparing myself to everyone else's highlight reels. That's when I stumbled across a profile that caught my eye. It was a guy named Alex, and he was exactly my type. Ruggedly handsome, adventurous pictures of him hiking and traveling, a bio that mentioned all my favorite books and movies. He seemed perfect. Too perfect, maybe. But I was vulnerable, and I ignored the little voice in my head that told me something was off. I started following him, liking his posts, leaving the occasional comment. He followed me back, and soon we were exchanging messages. We talked for hours every day, about our dreams, our fears, our past relationships. He was a great listener, empathetic and understanding. He made me feel seen, heard, and understood in a way that no one else ever had. Of course, we never video chatted or met in person. He always had an excuse. He was traveling for work. He was dealing with a family emergency. He had a terrible internet connection. Red flags, I know. But I was so caught up in the fantasy of it all that I didn't want to see them. Then one day, he sent me a picture, a shirtless selfie of him in a hotel room. He said he missed me and wished I was there with him. It was a very attractive picture, and it was the final push that made me spiral. I felt hideous in comparison to him. I was nothing like this perfect specimen. This picture made me self-aware. I wanted him to feel the same. I wanted to be desired. I knew he would never want me as I am. In the moment I realized that I had become self-aware that I was not his type, I became spiteful. Here comes the part I'm most ashamed of. I decided to create a fake profile of my own. I found pictures online of a woman who was everything I wasn't, tall, slim, blonde, with perfect features. I gave her a name, Sarah. I created a whole backstory for her, a struggling artist living in New York City, with a passion for travel and a quirky sense of humor. I even created a separate email address and social media accounts for her. Then I reached out to Alex. As Sarah, he responded almost immediately. He was just as captivated by Sarah as I had been by him. We started talking, and it was like reliving our earlier conversations, but with a different dynamic. As Sarah, I was confident, witty, and alluring. I flirted with him shamelessly, sending him suggestive messages and photos, stolen from the internet, of course. He ate it up. He told me how beautiful I was, how much he enjoyed talking to me, how he couldn't wait to meet me in person. The attention was intoxicating. For the first time in a long time, I felt attractive and desirable. But it was all a lie. Every compliment, every expression of affection, was based on a false persona. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop. I was addicted to the validation, the feeling of being wanted. As time went on, the lies became more elaborate. I created fake friends for Sarah, posting photos of them on her social media accounts. I even staged fake dates with other men just to make Alex jealous. The whole thing was a twisted game, and I was playing it with reckless abandon. Things started to get really complicated when Alex suggested we meet in person. I panicked. I couldn't reveal the truth, but I also couldn't keep stringing him along forever. I came up with another excuse. Sarah had to go to Europe for an art residency for several months. It was a convenient way to postpone the inevitable confrontation. While Sarah was supposedly in Europe, I continued to message Alex from my real account. I acted like nothing was wrong, like I wasn't living a double life. He seemed oblivious. He would tell me about his conversations with Sarah, how much he liked her, how excited he was to meet her when she got back. It was excruciating to listen to. The guilt was eating me alive, but I still couldn't bring myself to confess. The art residency was extended, and extended, and extended. I kept finding reasons for Sarah to be away, desperate to avoid the moment of truth. But then something unexpected happened. I started to develop real feelings for Alex, not just as Sarah, but as myself. I realized that I genuinely enjoyed talking to him, that I valued his friendship, that I admired his kindness and intelligence, and I knew that I was hurting him, betraying his trust in the most profound way possible. One night, after a particularly long and heartfelt conversation with Alex as myself, I broke down. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to tell him the truth. I wrote a long, rambling message explaining everything. How I had created the Sarah profile out of insecurity and loneliness. How I had lied to him for months, manipulating his emotions and exploiting his trust. How deeply sorry I was for the pain I had caused him. I hit send, then turned off my phone and went to bed, bracing myself for the fallout. The next morning, I woke up to a barrage of messages from Alex. He was angry, hurt, and confused. He couldn't believe that I had lied to him so brazenly, that I had played with his feelings in such a cruel way. He called me names, accused me of being a sociopath, and told me that he never wanted to speak to me again. I deserved it. I had broken his heart, and I had no right to expect forgiveness. I tried to apologize, to explain myself, but he wouldn't listen. He blocked me on all his social media accounts and cut off all contact. I was devastated, not just because I had lost him, but because I had lost myself in the process. I had become someone I didn't recognize, someone capable of deception and manipulation. I spent the next few months wallowing in guilt and regret. I deleted the Sarah profile and all its associated accounts. I went to therapy to try to understand why I had done what I did. I learned that my actions were rooted in deep-seated insecurities and a desperate need for validation. I started working on myself, focusing on my strengths, and accepting my flaws. It's been years since then. I'm still single, but I'm okay with that. I've learned to love and accept myself for who I am, without needing the approval of others. But the shame of what I did still lingers. I often wonder what happened to Alex. If he ever forgave me. If he ever found someone who loved him for who he truly was. I know that I can never undo the harm I caused him, but I hope that by sharing my story, I can at least offer a cautionary tale, a reminder that online relationships are not always what they seem, and that honesty and authenticity are always the best policy, even when they're difficult. I'm still ashamed of what I did, but I'm also determined to learn from my mistakes and to become a better person. Maybe someday, I'll even have the courage to reach out to Alex and apologize in person. But for now, I'll just keep working on myself, hoping that one day I can finally forgive myself for being the catfish in this twisted love story. For years, it's a story about deception, loneliness, and the twisted lengths people will go to for connection. It's a catfish love story, but not the kind you see on TV. This one is far more insidious, and I'm the villain. It all started during a particularly lonely summer after high school. Most of my friends had gone off to college, leaving me behind with a dead-end job at the local grocery store and a whole lot of free time. I was scrolling through an old forum dedicated to a niche interest we all shared. Everyone went silent. It was an escape, a place where I could be someone else, someone more interesting than the awkward, insecure kid I felt like in real life. That's when I stumbled across her profile. Her username was Artemis_Dreamer. Her profile picture was a grainy, black and white image of a woman with long, flowing hair and piercing eyes. She wrote poetry, shared philosophical musings, and had a way of expressing herself that captivated me. I was instantly drawn in. We started messaging each other privately. At first, it was just casual conversation about the forum's topic, but soon we were talking about everything. Our hopes, our fears, our dreams. She told me about her struggles with a rare autoimmune disease that kept her mostly housebound, how it had robbed her of her ability to pursue her passion for dance. My heart ached for her. I, in turn, shared my own insecurities, my fear of failure, my longing for something more. She listened without judgment, offering words of encouragement and understanding. I found myself falling for her hard. But there was a problem. Artemis_Dreamer wasn't real. I created her. The grainy profile picture? Stolen from a vintage magazine. The poetry? Plagiarized from various sources online, carefully curated to match the persona I was crafting. The autoimmune disease? A figment of my imagination, designed to elicit sympathy and explain why we could never meet in person. Why did I do it? It's hard to explain. Part of it was boredom, a desire to fill the void of my empty summer. Part of it was a twisted experiment, a test of my ability to create a believable online identity. But mostly, it was loneliness. I craved connection. And Artemis_Dreamer was a way to experience that without exposing my true self. I knew it was wrong, but I justified it by telling myself it was just a harmless fantasy. No one was getting hurt. But as time went on, the fantasy became increasingly real. We spent hours messaging each other every day. We shared secrets, we laughed, we even cried together. Or at least, I pretended to. I crafted a detailed backstory for Artemis_Dreamer, giving her a family, a past, a whole life that existed only in my head. I was careful to avoid any details that could be easily disproven, always keeping her just out of reach. I knew I couldn't keep up the charade forever, but I was addicted to the attention, the validation, the feeling of being loved by someone, even if that someone was a figment of my own creation. Then came the video calls. She asked if we could video chat. I panicked. Obviously, that wasn't going to work. I made up some excuse about having a faulty webcam. She was disappointed but understanding. Then, a month later, she claimed her webcam was fixed. I tried to dodge, but her persistence grew. and she said she had been excited about it for a while. I was on the verge of ending things when I came across deepfake technology. It was still in its early stages, but I was able to use it to create a semi-convincing video of Artemis_Dreamer. The video was shaky, the lighting was poor, and the voice was distorted, but it was enough. I showed it to her during our next video call. She was thrilled. "I knew you were real," she typed, her message filled with heart emojis. It only made me feel worse, but I couldn't stop now. I continued to use deepfake technology for our video calls, always making excuses for the poor quality, blaming it on her unreliable internet connection. I told her that the autoimmune disease affected her appearance, so she looked slightly different. She said she understood and sympathized. I felt incredibly terrible and disgusted at myself. As the months turned into years, our relationship deepened. We talked about the future, about what it would be like when she finally recovered and we could meet in person. We even talked about marriage. It was a cruel, twisted joke, but I couldn't bring myself to end it. I had become dependent on her, on the unconditional love and acceptance that Artemis_Dreamer provided. I knew I was hurting her, but I couldn't let go. I just couldn't. One day, I received a message from her sister. Artemis_Dreamer had passed away in her sleep due to complications from her illness. I was devastated. Even though she wasn't real, the connection we shared felt real to me. I grieved for her, for the life we would never have, for the pain I had caused her. Then, a few weeks later, I received another message from her sister. She had found my messages on Artemis_Dreamer's computer and wanted to know who I was. She said Artemis_Dreamer talked about me all the time and was so excited to be with me. She asked if I wanted to meet to talk about her. This was it. My deception was about to be exposed. I considered ghosting her sister, disappearing without a trace. But I knew that wasn't the right thing to do. I owed it to Artemis_Dreamer to tell her sister the truth. We met at a coffee shop. I sat across from her, my hands shaking, my heart pounding in my chest. I told her everything. About the forum, about the fake profile, about the deepfake technology, about everything. She listened in silence, her expression unreadable. When I was finished, she didn't yell, she didn't cry. She simply said, "I don't understand." She told me that my actions had deeply hurt her sister, who was an actual disabled woman with a disease. She said it was disgusting that I mocked her. It was more vile and despicable than she could ever imagine. I apologized profusely. I told her I never meant to cause any harm, that I was just lonely and desperate for connection. She didn't say anything. She just nodded slowly. After a long moment, she stated her leaving. Before she left, she said, "I hope you can find a way to live with yourself." Her words haunt me to this day. I know what I did was wrong, unforgivably wrong. I deceived someone who was vulnerable and lonely, and I caused her immeasurable pain. I'm not looking for sympathy or forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted to share my story, to confess my sins, in the hopes that it might somehow ease the burden of my guilt. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive myself, but I hope that one day I can find a way to make amends for the damage I've caused. Until then, I'll continue to carry this secret, this shame, with me wherever I go. It's a reminder of the darkness that lies within me, and a warning to never again succumb to the temptation of deception. I know this is going to sound crazy, and a part of me still can't believe it actually happened. It's been almost 7 years, and the shame still claws at me. I need to tell someone, anyone, even if it's just into the void of the internet. It started, like so many things do these days, with a harmless online game, a massively multiplayer online role-playing game, or MMORPG, to be exact. I was in my early 20s, working a dead-end job, and feeling generally lost and unfulfilled. This game, Ethereal Kingdoms, offered an escape, a chance to be someone else, to explore a world of magic and adventure. I created a character, a powerful sorceress named Lyra, and threw myself into the game. It wasn't long before I joined a guild, a group of players who banded together to complete quests and battle other players. That's where I met Kalen. Kalen was the leader of the guild, a charismatic and skilled player. His character, a noble knight, was always at the forefront of every battle, protecting his allies and dealing devastating blows to the enemy. He was everything I wasn't, confident, decisive, and admired by everyone in the guild. We started talking in the game's chat channels, strategizing for battles, and sharing tips. Gradually, our conversations became more personal. We talked about our lives outside the game, our hopes and dreams, our fears and insecurities. Kalen told me he was a medical student, studying hard to become a doctor. He described his demanding schedule, his passion for helping people, and his love for his family. He seemed like the perfect guy, intelligent, compassionate, and driven. The more we talked, the more I fell for him. It was a different kind of connection than I'd ever experienced before. We understood each other on a deep level, sharing a sense of humor and a shared worldview. I knew it was just a game, but the feelings were real. He asked me to move our conversations to a private messaging app, saying he preferred the interface. I didn't hesitate. We exchanged numbers and started texting and calling each other regularly. His voice was even more charming than I'd imagined. We talked for hours every night, losing track of time as we shared our thoughts and feelings. One day, Kalen sent me a picture. It was a selfie of him in a hospital setting, wearing scrubs and a stethoscope. He had dark hair, piercing blue eyes, and a handsome, chiseled jawline. He looked exactly like the kind of guy I'd always dreamed of being with. I was smitten. We started planning a date. He lived in another state, a few hours away, but he said he was willing to drive to meet me. I was ecstatic. I spent weeks agonizing over what to wear, how to do my hair, and what to say. I wanted everything to be perfect. The day of our date arrived, and I was a nervous wreck. I waited for him at the designated meeting spot, a coffee shop in my town. I checked my phone every few minutes, refreshing the messaging app. An hour passed. Then 2. He never showed up. I tried calling him, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I sent him text messages, but he didn't respond. I was devastated. I couldn't understand what had happened. Had he changed his mind? Had something happened to him? I spent the next few days in a state of confusion and heartbreak. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything. Then, a week later, I received a message from Kalen. He apologized profusely for missing our date, claiming he'd had a medical emergency. A patient had come into the hospital in critical condition, and he'd had to stay and assist with the surgery. He said he'd tried to call, but his phone had died. I was skeptical, but I wanted to believe him. I missed him terribly, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing him. So I forgave him. We rescheduled our date, and this time, he promised he wouldn't let me down. The same thing happened again. He stood me up, claiming another medical emergency. This time I was furious. I confronted him, accusing him of lying to me. He denied it vehemently, insisting that he was telling the truth. He sent me pictures of himself in the hospital again, looking exhausted and stressed. He begged me to trust him, to give him another chance. Again, I gave in. I wanted so badly for this to be real, for him to be the person I thought he was. This cycle of broken promises and tearful apologies continued for months. He'd plan a date, stand me up, offer some elaborate excuse, and then beg for forgiveness. Each time, I became more suspicious, but I couldn't bring myself to end things. I was too invested, too emotionally attached. Then, one day, I decided to do some digging. I started with a simple reverse image search of the pictures he'd sent me. The results were shocking. The pictures weren't of him at all. They were of a male model, whose images were readily available online. I confronted him with my findings, sending him the links to the model's website and social media accounts. He didn't respond. I called him repeatedly, but he wouldn't answer. Finally, after hours of silence, he sent me a single message. "I'm sorry." That was it. No explanation, no justification, just a simple apology. I was heartbroken, but also relieved. The truth was finally out. I had been catfished. I blocked him on all platforms and tried to move on with my life. But the experience had left a deep scar. I felt foolish, naive, and betrayed. I couldn't believe I had fallen for such an obvious scam. But the worst part was the realization that the person I had fallen in love with never existed. The Kalen I had known was a figment of my imagination, a carefully constructed persona designed to manipulate and deceive me. But here's the part I'm most ashamed of, the part I've never told anyone. After the Kalen facade was shattered, after the apologies and the blocking, a new message appeared. This time, it wasn't from a nightly doctor. It was from Sarah, a shy, artistic woman who confessed to creating the Kalen persona. Sarah explained that she was insecure and lonely, and had used a fake profile to connect with people online. She said she'd never intended to hurt me, and that she'd actually fallen in love with me too, while pretending to be Kaylin. At first, I was furious. How dare she try to manipulate me again? But then, something unexpected happened. I started talking to Sarah. I needed answers. I needed to understand why she had done what she did. And surprisingly, I found myself connecting with her. Sarah was nothing like Kaylin. She was quiet, introspective, and deeply insecure. But she was also kind, intelligent, and creative. We talked for hours about her life, her struggles, and her regrets. She told me about her own feelings of loneliness and isolation, her longing for connection, and her fear of rejection. As I listened to her, I started to see her as a person, not just as the catfish who had deceived me. And I realized that I was still drawn to the person behind the screen, even if that person wasn't who I'd initially thought. Against my better judgment, I started to develop feelings for Sarah. The connection we had forged as Kaylin hadn't completely disappeared. It had simply shifted to a new, albeit more complicated form. We continued talking for months, building a new relationship based on honesty and vulnerability. I even started to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could make it work. Then, one day, Sarah confessed something that shattered everything. The truth is, she wasn't entirely honest with me about her intentions. She admitted that she had initially created the Kaylin persona with the intention of scamming people out of money. She had researched common online scams and decided that a romantic catfish scheme would be the most effective. She had targeted me because I seemed vulnerable and lonely, and she had planned to eventually ask me for financial help. But then, she said, she had actually fallen in love with me, and she couldn't go through with the scam. She felt guilty about what she had done, and she wanted to come clean. I was devastated. Not only had I been catfished, but I had also been targeted for a financial scam. The person I had started to care for was a con artist who had initially intended to steal my money. I ended all contact with her immediately. I blocked her on all platforms and vowed to never speak to her again. But the damage was done. I had been emotionally manipulated and betrayed in the worst possible way. And the shame of falling for it, not once but twice, continues to haunt me to this day. The whole thing makes me sick. I was so eager for a connection that I ignored every red flag, every warning sign. I allowed myself to be fooled, not just by a fake persona, but by a genuine predator. And the worst part is, a part of me still wonders what could have been if things had been different. If Sarah had been honest from the beginning, if she hadn't tried to manipulate me, could we have actually had a real relationship? It's a question that I'll probably never have the answer to. And it's a question that I'll continue to ask myself every time I think about the catfish who stole my heart and shattered my trust. I've never told anyone this. I'm too ashamed. Maybe writing it down will help me finally start to move on. Okay, here it goes. This is hard. Humiliating, really. But I need to say it. I was a catfish. Not a little one, either. A full-blown, deep-sea leviathan of a catfish. And it wasn't some harmless, fleeting thing. This went on for 2 years. 2 freaking years. It started, like a lot of stupid things do, with boredom and insecurity. I was 22, fresh out of college, and feeling invisible. All my friends were getting married, buying houses, landing amazing jobs. I was stuck working a dead-end retail job and living in my mom's basement. I felt like I was failing at life. One night, scrolling through Instagram, I stumbled across this profile. A girl named Ava. She was stunning. Like cover of a magazine stunning. Long, dark hair, piercing blue eyes, a smile that could melt glaciers. Her bio said she was a photographer, traveling the world and capturing its beauty. I was immediately drawn in. But of course, it seemed too good to be true. And it was. I knew, deep down, that those pictures weren't of her. They were too perfect, too professional. But I ignored that little voice in my head. I was lonely, and Ava was, well, Ava was everything I wasn't. Confident, adventurous, beautiful. So, I created a fake profile. I stole pictures of some random guy I found online. Decent looking, but not ridiculously handsome. I made up a name, Liam, and crafted a backstory about being a struggling musician, trying to make it big in the city. I messaged Ava, and to my surprise, she messaged back. We started talking, and it was amazing. She was witty, intelligent, and incredibly kind. She told me about her travels, her dreams, her fears. I told her about my fabricated struggles, my passions, my hopes. We connected on a level I'd never experienced before. The problem was, The more we talked, the deeper I fell. I knew it was wrong. I knew it was a lie. But I couldn't stop myself. Ava made me feel seen, heard, understood. She made me feel worthy. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. We spent hours messaging each other every day. We'd talk about everything and nothing. I even started writing songs inspired by her, which I'd send her as voice memos. She loved them, said they made her feel like she was right there with me, experiencing the music. The guilt was always there, gnawing at me. But I justified it by telling myself that Ava was just a fantasy, a way for me to escape my boring, pathetic life. I'd never actually meet her, so what harm was I really doing? Then, she suggested we video chat. My heart stopped. This was it, the moment of truth, the moment the whole house of cards would come crashing down. I panicked. I made up excuses. Bad internet connection, broken webcam, stage fright, anything to avoid showing her my real face. She was understanding, but I could tell she was disappointed, and that disappointment stung. I hated myself for putting her in that position. I knew I had to end it, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I was addicted to the validation, the connection, the feeling of being loved. So I doubled down. I started using a voice changer during phone calls, deepening my voice to sound more like the guy in the pictures. I even created a fake Instagram account for Liam, posting pictures of concerts and open mic nights that I'd found online. The lies became more elaborate, more frequent. I was living a double life, and it was exhausting, but I couldn't stop. I was trapped in my own web of deceit. After a year, Ava told me she was coming back to my city. She wanted to meet me in person. This was my nightmare scenario. I knew I couldn't go through with it. I couldn't face her, knowing what I'd done. I made up some story about having to go out of town for a family emergency. She was understanding, but I could sense her frustration. She said she was tired of the excuses, tired of the distance. She needed to know if we were ever going to be real. That was my chance to come clean, to tell her the truth, to beg for her forgiveness. But I chickened out. I told her I loved her, that I wanted to be with her, but that the timing just wasn't right. She didn't buy it. She said she needed space to think. For a week, I didn't hear from her. I was a mess. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I was convinced she'd figured out the truth, that she was going to expose me. Then she messaged me. She said she decided to give me another chance. She was willing to wait, to be patient. But she needed to know that I was serious about her. She wanted to know that I was who I said I was. That's when she asked for a picture. A real picture. Of me. In that moment, I knew I couldn't lie anymore. I couldn't keep dragging her along, leading her on with false promises. I wrote her a long message. I confessed everything. I told her about my insecurities, my loneliness, my desperation for connection. I told her about the fake profile, the stolen pictures, the voice changer. I told her how much I cared about her, how much I regretted hurting her. Then I waited. For hours, I stared at my phone, praying for a response. But nothing came. Finally, I fell asleep, exhausted and defeated. When I woke up, there was a message from Ava. It was short and simple. I know. My blood ran cold. How did she know? Had she figured it out on her own? Had someone told her? I replied, begging her to explain. She sent me a link to a website. It was a reverse image search. Someone had used one of the pictures from Liam's fake Instagram account and discovered that it belonged to someone else entirely. Ava had known for months. She'd been playing me the entire time. I was devastated. Not just because I'd been caught, but because I'd been so easily manipulated. I thought I was the one in control, the one pulling the strings. But I was just a pawn in her game. I asked her why she hadn't said anything, why she'd let it go on for so long. Her response was chilling. I wanted to see how far you'd go. She told me she'd been catfished before, and she wanted to understand why people did it. She wanted to see what motivated them, what they were hoping to gain. I was her experiment, her subject, her entertainment. She blocked me after that. I never heard from her again. The shame and humiliation were overwhelming. I deleted all my fake profiles and shut myself off from the world. I felt like everyone was laughing at me, pointing and whispering behind my back. It took me a long time to recover. I went to therapy, got a new job, and started focusing on myself. I learned to accept my flaws and embrace my imperfections. I learned that true connection comes from authenticity, not from lies and deception. I still think about Ava sometimes. I wonder if she ever regretted what she did. I wonder if she ever understood the damage she inflicted. But mostly, I think about what I did. The lies I told, the trust one betrayed, the pain I caused. I'll never forgive myself for being a catfish. It's a stain on my conscience that will never wash away. But I can try to be a better person, to live an honest life, and to make amends for my past mistakes. This is my confession. I was a catfish, and I'm sorry. I hope that by sharing my story, I can help others avoid making the same mistakes. And maybe, just maybe, I can finally start to forgive myself. The truth is, I've been hiding something for nearly 7 years now, something that makes my skin crawl every time I think about it. It all started with a profile picture. A girl, maybe 22, with long, sun-streaked blonde hair and eyes the color of the summer sky, smiling against the backdrop of what looked like a Malibu sunset. Sunshine Sarah 89. Her handle read. I was 24, freshly heartbroken after a messy breakup, and desperately seeking some kind of connection, some kind of validation in the cold, anonymous landscape of online dating. So I swiped right. Sarah and I matched almost instantly. Her opening message was simple, playful. Hey there. Your profile says you're a musician. Tell me more. And just like that, I was hooked. We started messaging back and forth constantly. She was witty, charming, and seemed genuinely interested in everything I had to say. We talked about my band, my dreams of making it big, my favorite albums. She shared her own aspirations, wanted to be a photographer, travel the world, maybe open a small art gallery someday. It felt like we were kindred spirits, two lost souls, finding each other in the digital wilderness. Within a week, we moved from the dating app to texting. Soon, we were talking on the phone every night, sometimes for hours. Sarah had this infectious laugh that could make even the most mundane story sound hilarious. She listened intently when I talked about my insecurities, my fears, my past. She was everything I thought I wanted in a partner. Beautiful, intelligent, supportive, and seemingly head over heels for me. There was just one problem. We never met in person. I suggested it early on, of course. We should grab coffee, I said, or maybe catch a movie. But Sarah always had an excuse. She was busy with work. She was traveling to visit family. She wasn't feeling well. At first, I was understanding. I figured she was just cautious, maybe a little shy. But as the weeks turned into months, her reluctance to meet became increasingly frustrating. I started to get suspicious. I confronted her about it. Sarah, I really like you, I said during one of our late-night phone calls. But I can't keep doing this if we're never going to meet. It feels like you're hiding something. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I am, she finally admitted, her voice barely a whisper. It's complicated. She went on to explain that she had a rare medical condition that made her extremely self-conscious about her appearance. She was worried I wouldn't be attracted to her if I saw her in person. It was a long, elaborate story, filled with medical jargon and emotional vulnerability. And against my better judgment, I believed it. I felt terrible for her. I told her that her appearance didn't matter to me, that I cared about her personality, her mind, her heart. I told her I would be patient, that I would wait until she was ready. And I did. We continued our relationship online, building an intense emotional connection without ever laying eyes on each other. We exchanged photos, or rather, she exchanged photos. I sent her plenty of pictures of myself, but she only sent a handful, always carefully posed and filtered. I never saw her in natural light, never saw her without makeup, but I convinced myself that it was okay. That love was about more than just physical attraction. This went on for 2 years. 2 years of late-night phone calls, heartfelt text messages, and carefully curated online interactions. 2 years of excuses and half-truths. 2 years of slowly eroding my own self-respect. Then, one day, I received a message from an unknown number. I think you should know the truth about Sarah. It read. Attached was a link to a social media profile. The profile belonged to a woman named Michael. He was a man in his late 30s, with a receding hairline, a slight paunch, and the same piercing blue eyes as Sunshine Sarah 89. The profile was filled with pictures of Michael, his friends, his family, his ordinary, unremarkable life. It took me a while to process what I was seeing. The beautiful blonde girl, the aspiring photographer, the woman I had fallen in love with, she was a lie. A complete fabrication. Michael had created this elaborate persona to catfish me, to manipulate me, to extract emotional validation from me. I felt a wave of emotions wash over me: disbelief, anger, betrayal, and a profound sense of humiliation. I called Sarah, my hands shaking as I dialed her number. She answered on the third ring, her voice as sweet and innocent as ever. "Hey baby," she said. "How was your day?" "Who the hell is Michael?" I spat out, my voice trembling with rage. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then a nervous laugh. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. "Don't lie to me," I screamed. "I know everything. I saw the profile. I know you're not Sarah. You're Michael." She hung up. I tried calling her back, but my number was blocked. I tried messaging her on the dating app, but my account had been blocked there too. She had vanished, leaving me with nothing but a shattered heart and a mountain of unanswered questions. I spent the next few days in a daze, replaying every conversation, every text message, every phone call in my head, searching for clues I had missed, red flags I had ignored. I realized that there were so many things that didn't add up, so many inconsistencies in her stories. But I had been so blinded by my own loneliness, so desperate for connection, that I had chosen to believe the lie. I felt like an idiot, a gullible, pathetic idiot. After a few weeks, the anger started to subside, replaced by a deep, gnawing sadness. I mourned the loss of Sarah, the woman I thought I knew, even though she had never existed in the first place. I also mourned the loss of my own innocence, my own naivete. I had learned a harsh lesson about the dangers of online relationships, about the lengths people will go to in order to deceive and manipulate others. I wanted to report Michael to the police, but I was too ashamed. The thought of explaining the whole story to a stranger, of admitting how easily I had been duped, was too much to bear. So I kept it to myself, burying the pain and the humiliation deep inside. Over the years, I've tried to move on, to forget about Sarah, to rebuild my trust in others. I've had other relationships, both online and in real life, but I've never been able to shake the feeling that I'm being watched, that someone is lurking in the shadows, waiting to exploit my vulnerability. And that's the secret I've been hiding. The fear that I'll never be able to truly trust anyone again. The fear that I'm still, in some small way, in love with a lie. But what happened next is something that to this day shakes me to my core. About a year after the whole Sarah/Michael debacle, I received a package in the mail. It was a small, unmarked box. Inside, nestled in a bed of tissue paper, was a single photograph. It was a picture of me, taken from across the street, as I was walking my dog in the park. On the back of the photo, scrawled in messy handwriting, was a single word: always. I froze. A cold wave of dread washed over me. This wasn't just a random act of cruelty. This was a deliberate act of stalking, a chilling reminder that Michael was still out there, watching me, maybe even closer than I thought. I immediately called the police, finally overcoming my shame and telling them the whole story. They took the threat seriously, launching an investigation and advising me to take extra precautions. I installed security cameras around my apartment, changed my phone number, and avoided going out alone at night. For months, I lived in a state of constant anxiety, jumping at every shadow, afraid to answer the phone. The police eventually tracked down Michael, but they couldn't arrest him for stalking. They said there wasn't enough evidence to prove that he had sent a photograph, and even if they could, the legal penalties for online harassment were minimal. They issued him a warning and told him to stay away from me. But I knew that a piece of paper wouldn't stop someone who was clearly obsessed. So, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I spent weeks researching Michael, digging through his online presence, trying to understand what motivated him. I learned that he was a lonely, insecure man who had been bullied and rejected his entire life. He used catfishing as a way to escape his own reality, to create a fantasy world where he was loved and desired. I knew that confronting him wouldn't solve anything, but I couldn't just sit back and wait for him to strike again. I needed to send him a message, to let him know that I wasn't afraid of him. One night, I drove to his house, a small, run-down bungalow on the outskirts of town. I parked down the street and walked to his front door, my heart pounding in my chest. I took a deep breath and knocked. He opened the door, his eyes widening in surprise when he saw me. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice trembling. I didn't say anything. I just stared at him, my eyes filled with anger and contempt. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out a photograph. It was a picture of him, taken from his own social media profile. I had printed it out and written a single word on the back, forgotten. I handed him the photo and walked away, leaving him standing there, speechless, in the doorway of his lonely house. I never heard from Michael again, but the experience changed me forever. I learned that even in the seemingly anonymous world of the internet, actions have consequences. I learned that trust is a fragile thing, easily broken and hard to repair. And I learned that sometimes the only way to confront your demons is to face them head-on, to show them that you're not afraid. But the scar still remains, a constant reminder of the time I fell in love with a lie and the chilling aftermath that I can't believe I'm actually doing this, typing this out, admitting it to whoever might be reading. It's been weighing on me for so long, a heavy anchor dragging me down every time I try to move on. It started innocently enough, a stupid, impulsive decision that morphed into something, well, you'll see. It's a catfish love story, but not the kind you see on MTV. This one's darker, twisted, and all my fault. It was during my sophomore year of high school. I was invisible. Not unpopular, exactly, just utterly unremarkable. Average grades, average looks, no real talents or passions. I blended into the background. Then, I discovered online gaming. Specifically, this massive multiplayer online role-playing game, or MMORPG, called Realms of Eldoria. It was escapism at its finest. I could be anyone, do anything. I created a character, a powerful warrior named Lysandra. And suddenly, I wasn't invisible anymore. Lysandra was strong, beautiful, and respected. I spent hours every day leveling her up, completing quests, and interacting with other players. It was a whole new world, and I was finally someone. That's where I met Alex. His character, Zephyr, was a charismatic rogue, always cracking jokes and helping other players. We started teaming up on quests, chatting in-game, and eventually, exchanging messages outside the game. He was funny, intelligent, and surprisingly understanding. We talked about everything, our families, our hopes and dreams, even our insecurities. He listened without judgment, and I felt like I could truly be myself with him, or rather, with Lysandra. Here's where the catfishing began. Alex asked for a picture. A simple request, right? But I panicked. I knew he wouldn't be interested in the real me. So, I did what any insecure teenager would do. I Googled pretty girl and sent him a picture of some random model. He loved it. He said I was beautiful, exactly how he imagined Lysandra to be. That should have been my cue to come clean, to admit the truth and end things before they went too far. But I didn't. I liked the attention, the validation, the feeling of being desired. So I kept up the charade. I created a fake social media profile for Lysandra, filled with stolen photos and fabricated details about her life. I became addicted to the fantasy, to the idea of being someone else, someone better than myself. As weeks turned into months, Alex and I grew closer. We started talking on the phone, and I used a voice changer app to sound more feminine. It was exhausting, constantly maintaining the facade, but I was too afraid to stop. I had convinced myself that Alex wouldn't love the real me, that he was only interested in the image I had created. He talked about meeting in person. I always had an excuse: family vacations, school events, anything to avoid revealing the truth. But the pressure was mounting. I knew I couldn't keep this up forever. Then, one day, Alex told me he was coming to my town. He said he had a business trip nearby and wanted to finally meet me in person. My heart stopped. This was it, the moment of truth. I considered confessing everything, but the fear of rejection was overwhelming. Instead, I came up with a plan, a terrible, desperate plan. I found someone who looked vaguely like the girl in the photos I had sent Alex. Her name was Sarah, and she worked at the local coffee shop. I knew she was struggling financially, always working double shifts to support her family. I approached her with a proposition. I would pay her a significant amount of money to pretend to be Lysandra for one afternoon. I told her it was a prank, a silly game between friends, and that no one would get hurt. She was hesitant at first, but the money was too tempting. She agreed. The day Alex arrived was the most nerve-wracking day of my life. I met him at the train station, pretending to be Lysandra's friend, who was picking him up. I drove him to the coffee shop, where Sarah was waiting. The look on his face when he saw her, it was a mixture of excitement and relief. They spent the afternoon together, talking, laughing, holding hands. I watched from a distance, consumed by guilt and shame. I was using Sarah, manipulating Alex, and perpetuating a lie that had spiraled out of control. That night, Alex texted me, raving about how amazing Sarah was, how she was even more beautiful and wonderful in person. He said he was falling in love with her. That's when I realized the full extent of my actions. I wasn't just hurting myself. I was hurting Alex and Sarah too. I had created a situation that was bound to end in heartbreak. The next few weeks were a blur. Alex and Sarah started dating. I continued to play the role of Lysandra's friend, offering advice and support, all while knowing the truth. The guilt was crushing me, but I was too afraid to intervene. I told myself that maybe, just maybe, they could make it work, that Alex wouldn't find out the truth, and everyone would be happy. Of course, that's not what happened. Eventually, Alex started noticing inconsistencies in Sarah's stories. He realized that she didn't know the things that Lysandra should know. He confronted her, and she broke down and confessed everything. I don't know the exact details of their conversation, but I know it was painful. Alex was devastated, betrayed, and heartbroken. He tracked me down. He knew who I was, who I had been pretending to be all along. He confronted me in the school parking lot, his eyes filled with anger and hurt. I tried to apologize, to explain, but the words wouldn't come. He didn't want to hear it. He called me a liar, a manipulator, and a monster. Then, he walked away, leaving me standing there, alone with my shame. I never saw Alex again. He moved away shortly after, and I never heard from him. Sarah quit her job at the coffee shop and disappeared. I tried to contact them, to apologize, but they wanted nothing to do with me. And I don't blame them. It's been years since then. I've tried to move on, to forget what I did, but the guilt always lingers. I know I can never truly make amends for the pain I caused, but I hope that by confessing this, by acknowledging the harm I inflicted, I can at least start to heal. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just need to get this off my chest, to finally admit the truth, even if it's just to myself. This is my confession. I was a catfish, and I destroyed a love story before it even had a chance to begin. I've never told anyone this before, but I think I need to. It's been eating me up inside for so long, a slow, gnawing guilt that just won't let me rest. It's a story about a catfish love story gone wrong. Terribly, disturbingly wrong. I was in a really low place, mentally, about 6 years ago. Fresh out of a messy breakup, feeling lost, and desperately craving connection. That's when I stumbled into the dark rabbit hole of online dating. Not the usual apps, though. I was too scared to use my real picture, too afraid of being judged or rejected. Instead, I found myself drawn to these obscure forums, these online communities dedicated to finding love through anonymous profiles and fabricated identities. It started innocently enough. I created a profile using pictures of a model I found online. Sarah, I called her. She was beautiful, of course, with long blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, and a smile that could melt glaciers. I knew it was wrong, but I justified it to myself. I told myself I was just testing the waters, seeing if anyone would even be interested in getting to know the real me underneath the fake persona. And then he messaged me. Liam. He was everything I thought I wanted. Funny, intelligent, kind, and incredibly charming. We talked for hours every day, sharing our hopes, our dreams, our fears. He seemed to understand me on a level that no one ever had before. He was also incredibly lonely, like me. He told me he was a writer, struggling to make ends meet, and that he lived in a small town a few states away. He said he didn't have a picture because he was camera shy, which I bought hook, line, and sinker. We talked about everything except meeting. Every time I brought it up, I made excuses. I was too busy with work. I didn't have the money to travel. I was scared of getting hurt again. The truth was, I was terrified of him finding out the truth about Sarah. But the longer we talked, the deeper I fell. I started to genuinely care about Liam, about his happiness, about his well-being. I knew it was wrong. I knew I was leading him on, but I couldn't bring myself to stop. He made me feel alive again, made me feel like I mattered. Months turned into years. We built this whole world together, this online fantasy where we were soulmates destined to be together. We exchanged gifts through the mail, little things that represented our inside jokes and shared memories. He even wrote me poems, beautiful, heartfelt poems that made me cry. I knew I had to tell him the truth. I planned to do it so many times, rehearsing the words in my head, imagining his reaction. But I always chickened out. The thought of losing him, of shattering our perfect little world, was too much to bear. Then, one day, Liam told me he was coming to visit. He said he'd saved up enough money for a bus ticket and that he couldn't wait any longer to meet me in person. Panic set in. This was it, the moment of truth. I had to tell him. I typed out a long, rambling message, pouring my heart out, confessing everything. I told him about the fake profile, about the stolen pictures, about my insecurities and fears. I begged him to understand, to forgive me. And then I waited, and waited, and waited. He didn't respond. Days turned into weeks. I sent him messages, called him on the phone, even tried to track him down online. Nothing. It was like he'd vanished off the face of the earth. I was devastated. I'd lost him, and I knew I deserved it. But then, a few months later, I received a package in the mail. It was a small wooden box. Inside, there was a single piece of paper. On it, there was an address, and a name, Daniel. I didn't recognize the name, but the address was familiar. It was the address of a small, run-down apartment building in my own city. Curiosity and dread warred within me. I knew I shouldn't go, that it was probably a trap, but I couldn't resist. I had to know what was going on. I drove to the address that evening. The apartment building was even shadier in person. Graffiti covered the walls, and the air smelled of stale cigarettes and desperation. I found the apartment number listed on the paper and hesitantly knocked on the door. A moment later, the door creaked open. Standing there, in the dim light, was a man I'd never seen before. He was skinny, with greasy hair, and a nervous twitch in his eye. He didn't look anything like the Liam I'd imagined. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice raspy and uncertain. I stammered, I'm looking for Daniel." The man hesitated, then shook his head. "There's no Daniel here. You must have the wrong address." He started to close the door, but I stopped him. "Wait," I said. I think I know you." I told him about Liam, about our online relationship, about the poems and the gifts and the hours we'd spent talking. As I spoke, I saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes, a look of shame, of guilt, of something else I couldn't quite decipher. "It was you, wasn't it?" I asked. "You were Liam." He didn't answer. He just hung his head and stared at the floor. "Why?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why did you lie to me?" He finally looked up, his eyes filled with a strange mixture of sadness and anger. "Because I was lonely," he said. "Because I wanted to be someone else, someone better than I am." He told me he'd been using a fake profile too, pretending to be a successful writer, living a life of adventure and romance. He'd chosen the name Liam because it was his grandfather's name, a man he admired and wanted to be like. He said he'd enjoyed talking to me, that he genuinely cared about me, but he couldn't bring himself to meet me in person, knowing that I would see the truth, that I would reject him for who he really was. I was furious. I wanted to scream, to hit him, to make him pay for the pain he'd caused me. But I also felt a strange sense of pity for him. He was just as broken and lost as I was. Before I could say anything, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, silver locket. It was the same locket I'd sent to Liam as a gift months ago. "I wanted you to have this back," he said, handing it to me. "It belongs to you." I took the locket, my hand trembling. I didn't know what to say. I just stared at him, trying to make sense of everything. "There's something else," he said, his voice barely a whisper. He led me inside the apartment. The place was a mess, cluttered with empty food containers, dirty clothes, and stacks of books. In the corner of the room, there was a computer desk, and on the desk, there was a photograph. It was a picture of Sarah, the model whose pictures I had used for my fake profile. But there was something different about it. The picture had been altered. The model's face had been replaced with my own, my real face, the face I was too afraid to show the world. "How?" I stammered. "How did you get this?" Daniel didn't answer. He just pointed to the computer screen. On the screen, there was a chat log between Liam and a private investigator. It turned out that Daniel had hired someone to track me down, to find out who I really was. He'd wanted to know the truth about Sarah, even if it meant uncovering my deepest secrets. I was horrified. I felt violated, exposed. He had taken my lie and twisted it into something even more sinister. But then, my eyes landed on something else on the screen, a folder labeled Sarah. I clicked on it. Inside, there were hundreds of pictures of me, Pictures taken without my knowledge. Pictures of me walking down the street, going to work, shopping at the grocery store. Pictures of me in my own apartment, taken through the window. He'd been stalking me. All this time, while we were building our online fantasy, he'd been watching me, obsessing over me, invading my privacy in the most terrifying way imaginable. I recoiled in horror. "You're sick," I whispered. "You're a monster." Daniel didn't deny it. He just stood there, his eyes filled with a strange, unsettling mix of sadness and triumph. "I just wanted to be close to you," he said. "I just wanted to be with you." I ran out of the apartment, screaming, and never looked back. I went to the police, but they couldn't do much. Since he hadn't physically harmed me, they said there wasn't enough evidence to press charges. They advised me to get a restraining order, which I did. I moved to a different city, changed my name, and tried to start over. But the memory of Liam and Daniel still haunts me to this day. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder, afraid that he's still out there, watching me, waiting for me. I'll never trust anyone online again, and I'll never forgive myself for starting this whole mess with a lie. It was a catfish love story that turned into a nightmare, and it's a nightmare I'll never escape. Okay, here it goes. I've never told anyone this, not even my therapist. It's a confession I've buried deep down, hoping it would just disappear with time. It hasn't. It's a catfish love story, but not the kind you see on TV. This one's darker, twisted, and entirely my fault. It started during a really lonely summer after high school. All my friends had scattered, some to college, others just drifted away. I was stuck in my small town, working a dead-end job at the local grocery store, feeling utterly invisible. I was always a bit awkward, never quite fitting in. Online was my escape. I spent hours on forums, lost in video games, just trying to connect with someone, anyone. That's when I met Sarah on a gaming forum. She was witty, intelligent, and shared my love for obscure sci-fi movies. We started messaging privately, then moved to email, and eventually to late-night phone calls. She was everything I thought I wanted in a girl. There was just one catch. Sarah didn't exist. I created her. I built her from fragments of girls I knew, actresses I admired, and pure imagination. She had long, flowing auburn hair. I'd always been a sucker for redheads, bright green eyes, and a quirky sense of humor. Her profile picture was a heavily filtered image of a model I found online, tweaked to look a bit more unique. Why did I do it? Partly out of boredom, partly out of loneliness, but mostly out of a desperate need for connection. I craved the attention, the validation, the feeling of being liked for who I pretended to be. Sarah became my alter ego, a bolder, more confident version of myself. I poured my heart into crafting her personality, making her someone I thought people would find attractive and interesting. And it worked. People, including a guy named Mark, were drawn to her. Mark was different. He was kind, genuine, and incredibly perceptive. He saw through the layers of sarcasm and cynicism that I usually hid behind, and he genuinely seemed to care about Sarah. We talked for hours about everything, our dreams, our fears, our hopes for the future. He was a writer, working on his first novel. He shared his stories with me, and I, as Sarah, offered encouragement and feedback. I even started incorporating some of his ideas into Sarah's persona, making her even more appealing to him. The more we talked, the deeper I fell. Not for Mark, but for the connection we had. It was intoxicating to be seen and appreciated, even if it was through a false identity. I knew it was wrong, incredibly wrong, but I couldn't stop myself. I was addicted to the attention, to the feeling of being loved. We talked about meeting up. I always had an excuse. Sarah was traveling, or sick, or had a family emergency. The longer I put it off, the harder it became to come clean. The lie had grown so big that it felt insurmountable. One day, Mark told me he was falling in love with Sarah. My heart sank. I knew I had to end it, but I couldn't bring myself to hurt him. So I did the worst thing imaginable. I strung him along. I told him I felt the same way, knowing full well that Sarah was a figment of my imagination. Things escalated. We started exchanging more intimate messages, sharing fantasies, building a future together that would never exist. I became consumed by guilt and anxiety. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't focus on anything else. I knew I was hurting Mark, but I was too afraid to face the consequences of my actions. Then, one day, Mark announced he was moving to my town. He'd gotten a job offer at a local bookstore and wanted to be closer to Sarah. Panic set in. I had to do something. I couldn't let him find out the truth. The lie had to end, but I couldn't bring myself to confess. So I killed Sarah. I crafted a tragic story about a sudden illness, a rare and aggressive form of cancer that took her life in a matter of weeks. I wrote Mark a tearful email, expressing Sarah's dying wishes for him to find happiness and move on. It was cruel, manipulative, and utterly heartless. But I did it. I thought that was the end of it. I'd gotten away with it. I could finally move on with my life. But Mark didn't move on. He came to my town as planned. He visited Sarah's grave, which I fabricated in my email, describing a fictional cemetery on the outskirts of town. He left flowers, wrote her letters, and sat by her grave for hours, mourning the loss of someone who never existed. I saw him there once, from a distance. He was sitting on the grass, head bowed, tears streaming down his face. The sight of his grief was like a punch to the gut. I wanted to run to him, confess everything, and beg for forgiveness. But I couldn't. I was too ashamed, too afraid of the pain I had caused. He eventually started working at the bookstore, just a few blocks from my grocery store job. We saw each other occasionally, but I avoided him at all costs. I couldn't bear to look him in the eye, knowing the truth. He was still grieving, still heartbroken over Sarah, and I was the reason why. Years passed. I went to college, got a job, started a life. But the guilt never faded. It lingered in the back of my mind, a constant reminder of the terrible thing I'd done. I tried dating, but I couldn't form meaningful connections with anyone. How could I, when I was still haunted by the ghost of Sarah? I knew I had to tell him the truth, but I was terrified of the consequences. What if he hated me? What if he reported me to the police? What if he did something drastic? But the weight of the secret was crushing me. I couldn't live with it any longer. So, I started writing this confession, putting my thoughts and feelings into words, hoping it would somehow ease the pain. But it hasn't. It's just made me realize how truly awful I am. Mark still lives in my town. He's still working at the bookstore. I see him sometimes, walking down the street, or grabbing coffee at the local cafe. He looks older, more worn down, but he still has that same kindness in his eyes. I know I need to tell him the truth. He deserves to know, but I'm paralyzed by fear. I don't know how to face him, how to explain what I did, how to ask for forgiveness. I'm a coward. I'm a liar. And I'm the reason why a good man is still grieving a woman who never existed. This is my confession. I don't know what to do with it now. Maybe sharing it will somehow bring me some peace. Or maybe it will just make me feel even worse. But either way, it's out there now. The truth is out there. And maybe, just maybe, one day I'll have the courage to face Mark and tell him everything. He deserves that much.